You're listening to Corb Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
तू जगा ले आत्मविश्वास को, गगन भी कप कपाएगा। विजय तिलक होगा अवश्य, तू विजय पर्व मनाएगा। अगर क्यों का बोध है तुझे, कोई प्रश्न नहीं सताएगा। पहचान ले राह अपनी तू, फिर लक्ष्य तुझे बुलाएगा। तू जगा ले आत्मविश्वास को, गगन भी कप कपाएगा। विजय तिलक होगा अवश्य, तू विजय पर्व मनाएगा।
Oh, wow, wow, wow. So, coming from the south of India, I understood most of what you said, but I would be very grateful if you could translate what it was.
Forgive my Hindi, that is the only medium in which I write.
I know.
So this is a poem that I had wrote some time back, and it talks about the fact that if you are confident, then you can shake the skies and win the world. And what is most important is you should know why would you win. If you know why, then you don't have to fear any questions. You will also be able to understand your way forward, and hence your end result would actually wait in anticipation for you. Your win will wait in anticipation for you. So therefore the why is very, very important. Yeah, and that's actually the objective of today's discussion. I wanted to talk about purpose, yeah, especially brand purpose. So that's why I narrated this.
That is very, very romantic of you, Sudeep. And unfortunately, the world is not half as romantic in reality. So, I have a very, very contrarian view on brand purpose. So, let me kick this off. I hope it's not as fiery as it's meant to be. So, what exactly is the purpose of brand purpose? Can you start there for me?
Sure. Okay. So Sharon, there's been lots of talk around purpose in the last few years. Particularly, I think after Paul Polman, the Unilever chairman, said that I don't want a brand within our portfolio that doesn't have a purpose. And you see brands like Lifebuoy, Surf Excel, Red Label, Vicks, etc., talking about purpose in one way or the other. So when I was thinking about it, I say when I look at the ecosystem, look at the work around us, I see purpose as a strategy towards four objectives. One of the four objectives, yeah. First is purpose as a means to creating meaning for consumers. Yeah. Second is purpose as a salience strategy. Third, purpose as a employee value proposition. And fourth, purpose as a shareholder proposition. So therefore, a brand could be using it for one of these four or a few of these four. But that is the kind of usage that I've seen in all kind of Indian as well as international brands. So that according to me is the purpose of brand purpose.
What does brand purpose do for consumers? So I see you mentioned creating meaning
Hmm.
and a salient strategy.
Hmm.
The salient strategy, I kind of agree with.
Hmm.
The creating meaning part, I don't fully understand. Could you explain that for me?
Okay. So we will ignore the last two, which is fairly simple and therefore it's not consumer facing, which is the employee value proposition and shareholder proposition. Let's
True.
speak about the first two. Yeah. So what I mean when I say purpose as a means to creating meaning, what I meant was that of course when you want to employ your purpose, the final objective that you want is that your consumers should love you because of what you stand for. Yeah. And that should hence define what kind of product are you giving to your consumer, how are you serving it to your consumers, how do you treat your consumers when they reach out to you in good or bad times, how do you treat your employees, how do you treat your other partners, etc., etc. So therefore if there is a purpose which the company or the brand or the entrepreneur holds close to their heart, if that is intertwined with everything that they do, that is what I meant when I said purpose is a means to creating meaning.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And so if I have to expand a little bit more on this, and I would refer to one of our older podcasts where we
Hmm.
spoke about, brand purpose, its employment
Right.
in a little bit, in a short context there.
Hmm.
The three ways in which one can create brand purpose or purpose for a brand or a company is by looking at consumers and creating value in one of the three ways. One is improving their quality of life. Second is righting a wrong. If you see something wrong happening and you want to stand against it. And number three is preventing the end of something good. Yeah.
Right.
So if a brand is able to, or a founder is able to ingrain any of these, start a company or a brand with this in mind, and then integrate it into their brand, into everything that the brand does, that is what I meant when I say purpose as a means of creating meaning.
I have a slightly different point of view. I believe a brand's only purpose, as in even for a business, is to create customer value for profit. The rest of it has to be in service of this case. Now, if the business is in the job of CSR, is contributing back to society, so be it. But as a customer, that should not and will not influence my buying decision. And this is where I think a lot of marketers get it wrong, where they substitute the brand positioning with brand purpose. So when you build a brand on positioning, you have to look at your category drivers. You have to look at why you're being purchased. You have to deliver a certain value. You have to at least promise this certain value to the customers to earn the right to be bought at the moment of truth. And that over time will help you establish an emotional connection. And you can go up your communication ladder and start talking about emotional benefits to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of marketers I see today are using brand purpose as the emotional connect to the
Hmm.
consumers. And I almost look at it as marketing malpractice.
Hmm.
I know it's a strong word, but I don't think it's anything else.
Hmm.
Because if you are going to tell the consumer, I am not very different from the others, I am serving a social cause. So by me, it's pure marketing laziness, in my opinion.
So let me take that further. So you started by saying that the purpose of any brand or any business is to create customer value with profit.
Yes,
Yeah. And you're right there. So a customer would buy any brand or any service if it creates some value for him or her.
yes,
And one is that even purpose is in that service. Yeah.
yes,
So therefore, you use purpose to be able to create that value for the consumer. Now, where I would possibly expand your articulation would be that what you're selling, a lot of the times we feel that we are selling a product of a certain size with a certain kind of dimensions, with certain kind of features and attributes. What you're also selling is how you make a consumer feel when he or she consumes or purchases your brand. Yeah, because there is a certain feeling you give to them. Now that feeling depends on how your brand is communicated and positioned.
right.
Yeah, some of the brands will make you feel that you've made a smart buy.
Hmm.
Yeah, hopefully rooted in product truths, that you've got great benefits, great price, etc., etc. Now some brands will make you feel that you've bought a very very expensive and premium brand, and they would justify that premium by some product truths and a whole lot of positioning. Yeah, because you then belong to a certain club, of people, only these many sort of people have that brand, etc., etc. So I also believe that purpose is employed to create that feeling of goodness, wholesomeness around the brand. Yeah. Especially if you're, like you said, let's take it to the extreme cases. And in an extreme case, if a category has quite a few products with undifferentiated benefits, and the consumer goes to the shop and looks at all of them in parallel, they would possibly, if the consumer is clear that none of them scores over the other in terms of product benefit, consumer would possibly buy the one that makes him or her feel better. Yeah. Sometimes that feel better means smarter. Sometimes that feel better means feel good about himself or herself. Yeah. Sometimes feel better means that possibly I am doing this to help somebody else. Yeah. A lot of the times we go to places where people are selling kites and paintings and stuff made by orphanages or people with disabilities, etc. Now the stuff that they're selling might not be comparable to other similar stuff that you buy in branded showrooms, but you buy it because you know that it is coming from the right place, it is going back to help somebody. Yeah.
But isn't that charity?
uh so if that stuff is something that I don't need, and it's just a desire, I will possibly say that it is charity, because I don't intend to use it. Now if I go to a shop and there are 6 bars of soaps lying there, and all of them are different to each other, etc., etc., and if my basic need from a soap is that it should be safe on the skin and it should be good to smell, now if I find 6 of these soaps there, all of them satisfy that condition in various different ways, and one of those soaps is made by kids in an NGO, I will possibly think about buying that, because one, it gives me the basic product benefits that I'm looking at, but what it also does, it makes me feel good that I purchase something which will possibly go in the right direction. Yeah. So therefore, the cause or the purpose behind the brand, stated or unstated, makes me consider that brand more favorably against others, as long as my category demands or drivers are met.
Right. So exactly. I think that's pretty much the point I was coming on to as well, right?
Hmm.
To say everything remaining constant,
Hmm.
ceteris paribus,
Hmm.
is only in the books. It
Hmm.
is by the economists, is the romantics who write ceteris paribus. The world never really sees ceteris paribus.
Hmm.
Things don't remain equal. When you go
Hmm.
to a store and you see different bars of soap, there are different bars of soap telling you different things. Yes, there could be one segment, or say
Hmm.
green soaps, all saying the same thing.
Hmm.
But even within green soap, there are some brands that have a different tone. And you have a certain affinity to that brand because you know it delivers.
Hmm.
Let's take, just for example, Hamam in Chandrika.
Hmm.
Let's say I'm a consumer from Tamil Nadu, Kerala, who's used Chandrika all the while.
Hmm.
And Hamam has now started a school,
Hmm.
sending village children to school so that they're healthy, and education is the mission that they've taken up.
Hmm.
I don't suddenly switch to Hamam.
Hmm.
My core benefit is the medicinal value that I believe Chandrika is giving me,
Hmm.
and I stick to that brand.
Hmm.
Just because Hamam is a good guy,
Hmm.
I'm not going to jump ship. Hamam has got to convince me on my category drivers
Hmm.
of an incredible claim of medicinal value of their green soap
Hmm.
for me to budge. Don't you agree with that?
Hmm. No, I agree, and uh, therefore I said that my category driver should be met. So that is where
Right,
I am with you.
right.
So another alternate world, if Hammam was also a soap which had medicinal properties. Yeah.
They claim
Mm,
to have it. So
yeah.
the
For
point is,
example, Medimix.
hmm,
Yeah, Medimix is a soap which
yeah,
people
Medimix
use
and
for.
Chandrika are very close to each other.
Yeah,
They're
yeah. So they
positioned very
use it
close.
for hair majorly. But says Medimix has its own credentials in certain parts of the country.
Right.
Yeah, so it has done what Chandrika has done in South, Medimix has been able to do in parts of East and some
Right.
parts of West, right?
Right.
Now they, for a consumer who has, affinity with either one of them,
Hmm.
because they know that it works and doesn't have particular hate towards the other, yeah, or a negative bias towards the other, then if one of them takes up a positioning where, and both of them are considered similarly effective, if one of them takes up a positioning of this one, they start working on, uh, you know making sure that the kids in certain villages are clean all the time, or they bathe before they go to school, etc. I think consumers would be favorably disposed towards that brand and would give it a chance. Yeah.
Right. So again, it's everything remaining constant. This can be a
Hmm.
fillip for the brand to move forward.
Hmm.
Okay, I get it.
You're listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitril Innovations, consultants to consumer facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to copcast.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
I want to further nuance the discussion, Sharan. And this is something that came to my mind only recently when I started thinking about purpose and when I started seeing brands how they are employing purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I use the word employ because, and this is where I draw the distinction, there are brands living the purpose, there are brands employing the purpose. Yeah, what I mean by employing is there are a lot of brands which possibly started long time or now, and they went along, with their core proposition that this is my core proposition, and then along the way they discovered that we can serve a higher purpose. Now some of them possibly don't do as much work around that purpose apart from making an ad. Yeah, and some of the brands which strike me of that kind are, say for example, Wix
Hmm.
or something like Prega News. Now Prega News, it makes a Women's Day film every year. Yeah, their latest one was hashtag she can carry both. Yeah, so the career as well as pregnancy, etc. It's a nice
Right.
film,
Right.
but I'm not sure what do they do about it.
Hmm.
Are they creating significant women education? Are they creating enough opportunities for women who come back after maternity leave, etc.? I
Hmm.
don't see that.
Hmm.
Similarly, Wix spoke about touch of care,
Hmm.
and which is a nice phrase, but
Hmm.
I don't know what are they doing about it. Now contrast it with two different examples, Sharan.
Hmm.
First example is the whole truth, and we've spoken about this brand earlier. Yeah.
Right.
uh, so the whole truth, the founder of it, Shashank Mehta, was already running a blog called the Fit Shit.
Right.
So he was passionate about busting this myth around healthy foods and how brands use that to cheat people.
Right.
And then along the way, he said that, okay, there seems to be a business in it. And he therefore created this range of snacks and food, etc., under the name The Whole Truth. And he didn't stop there, as I was saying the other day. He does a lot of stuff even today. So he continues his blogs. He has a channel where he talks about lots and lots of stuff. I think the product comprises, his own product comprises only 2 or 3% of what he says. 97% is about various other stuff, exercise, how to eat, when to eat, stuff like that. Yeah. So that is where I see that somebody who has been able to successfully create a purpose, live the purpose, and then integrate the purpose in the brand positioning in a manner such that both of them can go hand in hand seamlessly.
Hmm.
The other example here, Sharon, is Lifebuoy.
Hmm.
And I've seen a couple of films of there, which I don't think are TV films, they are digital films possibly, where they show variety of things that Lifebuoy does to really live the value of saving lives by teaching the value of hygiene, hand hygiene or hand washing hygiene to kids. Yeah, and while they might be using it to make their ad, what they also do in the background is adopting villages that have the highest diarrhea rate in India, and then by simply getting kids to adopt the hand washing routine, they are able to reduce the mortality rate of kids under the age of 5. Now, they could have gotten away by just employing it as a salience thing, like some of the other brands that I quoted. But what they did was they made sure that they are working behind the background, behind the scenes, and then they are doing some of this stuff. And once they reached a certain level, they have also made a film about it. So this is where it gets nuanced, that how do you employ the purpose within your brand strategy or brand communication.
Brilliant. I think I like both the examples because they also help me make a point.
Hmm.
But I see a bit of difference between Whole Truth and Lifebuoy.
Hmm.
Now, in when you said they're using it as a sense of meaning and sense of
Hmm.
salience, I believe both of them are using it in the sense of building brand salience.
Hmm.
Because, but still different. Whole Truth, I think, is being great on content marketing.
Hmm.
They put out a lot of content.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily call this purpose in the traditional sense,
Hmm.
but an extension of the proposition that they're bringing to the table. It's saying
Hmm.
transparency, and therefore you know what you're getting when you buy my product.
Hmm.
And they're extending this transparency across the spectrum of all touch points in communicating with the consumers. And that is what they're doing. And yes, it could be called a purpose,
Hmm.
but it is in service of their primary proposition of transparency.
Hmm.
I like it. I have no problems with it.
Hmm.
But I don't think that is exactly the purpose the wider mainstream is talking about.
Hmm.
Now, Lifebuoy. Now, this is where a lot of bad habits are triggered for the smaller brands. Lifebuoy is a giant,
Hmm.
as is Unilever. A lot of the Unilever brands, be it Lifebuoy, be it Dove, now that's saying we want to shatter standards of beauty and the campaign that's currently going on. I think it's great, but that also is in service of their main positioning. Lifebuoy talks about hand washing. Dove talks about gentle care, and it's primarily slightly older women who are basically mothers and therefore
Hmm.
kind of fits into their TG, but not wanting to see their daughters judged for their external beauty.
Hmm.
And it kind of settles pretty well. However, Unilever can afford to do this because they've built salience for their brand over years together.
Hmm.
And therefore, there is latent salience for these brands going away from the customer value narrative to use purpose to build an emotional connection
Hmm.
is allowable as long as they keep looking at their brand tracks and looking at customers' toms, pont, or awareness of the product credentials. They're
Hmm.
fine. But they can't do this forever. They've got to go back talking about their product and keep coming back to the purpose, if at all, over time.
Hmm.
So, for a new brand who learns from this, is where the problem starts.
Hmm.
The marketing manager or the brand manager or the brand owner chooses to look at value or the purpose of the brand as the positioning state. You
Hmm.
cannot say everybody wants to cite Tom shoes.
Hmm.
Tom shoes is one off. Patagonia is one off. You will not win in the marketplace just because you're a good person,
Hmm.
just because you're doing good. After I give you the money, if you choose to do good with it, great, but that is CSR. For a new brand, if it's purpose, a social consciousness, today it's too big a cost for a new brand to take up. And that is where I want to draw the line to say your social causes and an extension of your positioning into purpose are very different statements.
So I had two things possibly on that,
Mhm,
possibly to build on your points and
mhm,
very divergent directions.
hmm.
The first of it is the fact that, um, for a brand, and you're right, so Lifebuoy is a giant, Dove is a giant, yeah, and therefore possibly they have multiple levers available to them to keep both the product as well as the purpose story alive.
Pun unintended.
Yeah. So they will have, for example, sub brand or variant launches to keep adding back to the credentials of the brand.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they will have the main brand or the mother brand talking about the purpose and making sure that the consumer sees that, they are also a good person. Yeah. And there
Right.
might be a sincerity to it. There's no doubt about that.
I don't doubt it. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's not marketing.
Yeah. So that's one. The second, I think, is we need to also broaden our understanding of purpose.
Sure.
The purpose needn't always be about social good. Purpose also could be about passionately believing in some cause, and that cause could be very individual also. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, for example, Apple. Now, Apple doesn't state its purpose as something which is social good, right? But Apple always makes very, very beautiful things, and it is greatly loved by people who are creative. So it makes great devices for creative people.
Right.
Yeah, and it enables creative people. Now there's no social goodness to it, but
Right.
its purpose is clear, and therefore creative people are ready to buy an iPod, an iMac, an iPhone, an iWatch, everything from them, the whole ecosystem, because their purpose to them is clear. So therefore, when you go towards CSR, you're possibly leading from the fact that somebody is trying to create a social impact. Yeah.
Right.
Purpose has a larger definition. That is where I like the example of whole truth. So whole truth is about, like you said, giving you 100% visibility of what you are going to consume. And so therefore there's no social goodness to it. He's just giving you something which is transparent.
Right.
Yeah. And with that purpose in mind, they are doing this. So that was my first, this thing. So these are the two different points that I had in my mind.
Mhm.
First were around the fact that for a big brand, they have a product story and then they have a purpose story.
Right.
Yeah. So therefore I possibly would concur with you that if you're a small brand, if you're a startup, if you haven't got your product story right yet, then don't jump onto the purpose story. Otherwise you will lose the plot.
Exactly, ma'am.
However,
Yes.
however, before you say exactly completely, if you are somebody like the whole truth
Hmm.
and your purpose is fully integrated and built into your product story, then you are in a good space. Then you can explain your product while explaining your purpose and vice versa.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Just that I don't think purpose is the right term for that. I know it's grammatically correct. I know that's what we use today, but that is where people are misled because purpose is used a little too loosely. Now, I know we said we agreed on the points on the employer branding and shareholder. I'd like to go back to that also to say, as an employer brand, your why becomes very, very important because, like you touched upon in a previous podcast, to say it helps people to pull in one direction.
Hmm.
That is great. But same in when you put that purpose to the consumer, more often than not, the consumer doesn't care. So
Hmm.
I would like to tweak your first statement as say giving meaning, creating meaning for the customer,
Hmm.
as creating add-on value to the customer in addition, in relation to the core product or core benefit that is being offered. I wouldn't call it purpose just yet. On the strategy front is what Unilever is doing. And there, Unilever probably can afford to do it, but not for the long run. As P&G tried doing this in the US, and P&G tried doing this, probably did a bad job of it. But they have gone back to saying, I want to make my profit and then do good with it. I'm not doing good to make profit because consumers don't care until they've been served first. And on the employee front, I agree. Employee, I think it's a brilliant way to get employees on board. On the shareholder front, though, I don't think it is applicable at all in the sense that, yes, people want to be seen backing a green company, people want to be seen doing good, but why are these brands so expensive? Any company that's doing good is not selling low on margin. And that is exactly why shareholders are backing it. You saw what happened to Danone last year. The CEO got fired for focusing on ESG and not delivering on his profit. So ESG is good to talk about when you have your profits, and shareholders will listen to you when their dividends are going up. So shareholders are looking at money, and that is where I believe it is almost table stakes today for a company to create stakeholder value and not just shareholder value. And the fact that ESG is important, it should be known to everybody. All companies should have their ESG targets. I'm not saying no, they should be socially responsible. I'm just saying for the customer, as a brand, it does not matter. It is first what it matters is your core benefit. If you can offer ancillary value to it, it's great. Anything beyond that is just a good to have.
I would just possibly make a minor tweak,
Mhm.
and therefore, I don't think my contention was that the purpose is the only thing needed by a brand.
Right.
Yeah, purpose is great for the brand. Of course, you need to deliver your profits, your products, etc., etc. So, and to what you said, anything is an addition or an extra. I would only say that if you have got your product and your profits right, having a great purpose and living by it possibly gives you a great advantage over people, brands, and companies that don't have it,
Right.
because you are delivering what the consumer or the shareholders or employees expect you to deliver, which is your profits, your value, etc. And then
Mhm.
on top of that, you're making them feel good.
Right.
Yeah. So Apple wouldn't survive if they did not deliver great looking, extremely efficient products. Purpose and
Right.
all is good, but the product has to live up to it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, fair. So I
I
think,
think we're largely agreeing on the same point.
yeah.
I'm just going to go back to my problem with the word purpose. What purpose does is that it implies that you're giving up something
Hmm.
in favor of something else.
Hmm.
And when you make that your primary narrative, you are asking customers to give up something in favor
Hmm.
of the cause you're backing
Hmm.
when it's used in its pristine sense. And that does not make sense at all because the
Hmm.
customer is paying for a certain value to be delivered. I want a soap, I want it to do its job. I want buy a shampoo, I want it to do its job. I buy a car, I want it to do its job first. Everything else is a good to have. Because my first criteria as a customer to is to understand whether it's serving my purpose or creating the value I'm paying for first. And I think that's where we agree, saying that could be the should be the first need for the brand. And if you can crack a social messaging or a social cause along with the brand benefit is where you add greater value. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well summarized.
Perfect.
Okay. So I think we have now cracked the purpose of the brand purpose. And hopefully this serves the purpose of this podcast.
Oh, I'm sure it does. I don't think we've had such a long podcast on one question.
Thank you for listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.